Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 7th of July, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio. Welcome, Ben. And we've also got Diane Rasmussen McCaddy joining us by live link from the north of England. Well, of course, many people will remember that today is the anniversary of the 7/7 London bombings, and there's quite a lot, of course, spread across the press and media in UK about that. We're not going to dwell on those sad events, but we're going to take you deeper into the mire, which is what the UK government is up to. And we're going to try and bring people on board with the idea that it is our own government that is attacking us. And using a variety of techniques, we're going to be having a look today at what state control is going on and how the state tries to sell itself to the public. We're going to be having a look at the manipulation of language. We're going to be looking at the destruction of some of the pillars of society. And we are also going to be looking at the power of climate change. But first of all, let's have a look at what the government is actually doing. So this is a critical one, the use of propaganda and language control. And there's no doubt that this is steadily increasing as time goes on. We've also got the use of wars, proxy war, and the induced stress and fear that goes with that. We've got promoted migration, and of course it's not illegal migration that's causing the problem. It's actually the government's mass migration policies. That's why they don't want you to speak about it. We've also got destruction of the Constitution, which I've mentioned, and we're also looking at the increasing destabilisation of society. We've got some videos reflecting that today. And lastly, we're going to put here the attack on the minds of our children. So this is a pretty poisonous mix. It's just some of the things that the wider public and communities are being subjected to in UK. But for us, it's very clear that we are under immense attack by the very people who should be in power to protect and look after us and to run the country in a fair and reasonable way. Let's just have a look at one video of how MPs like to present themselves to the public.
Are the chances of getting rid of the two-child cap now diminished because this week the party failed to back the Prime Minister's hope for reforms on welfare? So simply there is less money around.
But the decisions that have been taken in the last week do make future decisions harder. But all of that said, we will look at this collectively in terms of all of the ways that we can lift children out of poverty. I came into politics to make sure that where a child comes from doesn't determine what they can go on to achieve. The mission that we're driving across government is about making sure that background doesn't equal success, because it doesn't determine success. Because for far too many children in our country, the family that they're born into, the town that they're born into, will absolutely determine their life chances. So dealing with child poverty, bringing down those numbers, making sure that all children can achieve and thrive.
So it's all lovely. That was Bridget Phillipson, Children and Women's Minister, saying how the government is doing everything for children. That's the children, of course, that the government itself is not stealing and taking away from parents. But this is how our MPs like to present themselves, as if they are squeaky clean and as if everything they are doing is for the best of the population. Note, of course, that that was a BBC interview and the backdrop was a cartoon. And I'm going to say to the audience that, of course, is not accidental. This is the BBC playing with people's minds. Were the words coming out of her mouth reality against the cartoon backdrop? But of course, the BBC is doing a lot of things with our minds. Let's just have a look at how their main page looked earlier today. We had a major article on murder in Australia. This is apparently so important that it's got to be plastered all over the UK's media. We've got a brief mention of course, war and death in Gaza. We've got, is the UK really any safer 20 years on from 7/7? So we can't forget 7/7 is being brought forward in order to ramp up fear and anxiety, with the BBC saying it can happen again. The King's telling us all to remain calm, probably with him in post and power. We shouldn't remain calm. And then this is mixed with a brief referral to tennis. So it's a really insane mix of headlines, and I would suggest it's done deliberately to cause stress in people. But let's have a look at this headline from the BBC. This is from a few days ago. It's an article about trans troops in the US military, and it's so long that the only way we could really get to grips with it is to take a little video, which is scrolling through your screen. I'm not going to let it play for too long, but suffice to say that this is the result of 4 months' work by the BBC looking at trans people in the US military who've now been told that they actually have to conform to their own sexual norms if they're going to stay engaged by the US military. But the BBC thinks this is an absolute major subject. And as we'll see, this is part of the BBC driving the change agenda. So if I switch across to one of the team that produced it, Sophie Easter, she talks about President Trump signing an order stating that being transgender is incompatible with the rigorous standards necessary for military service. She goes on to talk about some 4,240 transgender people in the US Armed Forces. And as I've said, the BBC has spent over 4 months putting this article together. But if we have a look at how many people are in the US military, we've got well over 2 million. And therefore, we're talking about a major BBC article reflecting 0.2% of the military personnel in America. So this is a deliberate attempt to skew people's impressions as to the importance of this subject. But if we have a look at another one of the BBC journalists, we've got Megan Mohan. And if we have a look at her background, she's the co-founder of Second Source. And if we go and look at Second Source, we find it was founded in order to promote awareness, offer community training and support, and work with organisations to create change. So this is the BBC promoting a change agenda, and in this case it's to do with trans, but of course LGBT is a big part of it. Let's have a look at what happens on the street when people are now clamouring for more and more openness of the trans agenda. And this is a little clip of the arrest of Monty Toms.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is E Speaks Freely, and today I am out in central London for a Pride Parade that is absolutely taking over the streets. It is huge. Oh, there's police officers. Where are they? There they are. So there's officers following us, and as you can see, they seemed pretty keen to find one Mr. Monty Toms. Which way are we going?
I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want you to come to any kind of harm.
I appreciate that, sir.
Yeah.
I'm not very intimidated by these people, and I'm going to keep walking.
Has anybody shown any kind of resistance to you so far?
They disagree with me, obviously.
Right. All it will take is one person to take in a different view.
Yeah. Well, it won't be my fault, will it? It'll be their fault.
Yeah.
A good future for us, and I also believe in like.
We're not going to win you over.
Let's go.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm going to walk down there, though.
Alright. Where are you going?
I don't know. All that way. I know. But you have a lovely day anyway. I appreciate it. Appreciate your professionalism in this. Alright. Thank you.
Nickname Montgomery.
The placard you're wearing, currently identified.
I'm really curious. Why do you need so many officers for this arrest? Because there are like 11 officers here right now. Why?
It's kind of the way we work. This group will be working together as a serial, so that's why they've come all in one, all as one.
Right, okay.
So there we are. This is the reality. We've now got increasing angst and indeed breakdown on the streets And is this accidental? I'm going to suggest not. This is part of the planned change agenda, which ultimately is going to transform this country. Diane, let's bring you in with us because, of course, you've been following what's been happening in academia and libraries and the change of language, particularly in children's books at least. But this control of language is absolute key to the way the government is controlling the wider public.
Thanks very much, Brian. And hello, Ben. It's good to be here today. I will be coming back to the control of children's minds through language and library books later on in the program. But first, I would like to talk about change and language and control overall. And this starts with this conference that I attended over the weekend, which is the Academy 2025 conference, sponsored by Ideas Matter. I went last year for the first time. It's kind of an academic, intellectual conference that's held every summer with themes like politics and literature and history. Last year's theme was about the end of civilization. This year was slightly more cheerful with the theme of upheaval and asking the question, why does politics need a new language? And I think there are a lot of discussions over the weekend that might have explored whether or not we actually need a new language or kind of what is happening with language in general. So I just want to pull out a couple of things that I found particularly interesting from the conference, and then I'd like to just reflect a bit on what I heard and maybe get some ideas from Brian and Ben about this. The opening keynote speaker was Professor Frank Ferretti, who was at the conference last year. This year's talk was called The Search for Home in an Alienated World. And this is based on a Substack post that he posted on Saturday morning, and he's been working on this idea quite a bit lately. When we talk about the idea of what alienation means as a definition, which was originally a Marxist term, and over time it's kind of, as he said, kind of floated over into populist language. But essentially the problem that we're facing now with this idea of alienation in society is that the common shared reality that we've experienced in the fairly recent past has gone away, that we still need a shared reality, but that we're losing that because of this estrangement that we're feeling in today's world, and that some of this seems to come from the control of language and the imposition of language that our governments have placed on us. So starting in 2020, for example, we all know the new language that came out, like the technocracy, COVID language related to things like new normal, social distancing. So it wasn't about physical distancing, although that was part of it. The idea is that we are supposed to be socially separate. Even redefining the term vaccine, right? Vaccines were supposed to originally, we thought, prevent something. And then we find out that no, actually, they don't prevent anything at all when it comes to so-called COVID and so-called vaccines. We see the Trump's language, his confusion that Trump creates with all of the overwhelming language that he uses. And there's a lot of Trump language, including social media posts and in other places. Even the term two-tier Keir has sort of influenced highly the public opinion of Keir Starmer and what he's done so far for his first year as prime minister. And what he sort of said is that because of these language changes, one of the things that's happened is that we're no longer supposed to be proud of the community that we live in, that the quest for home is a normalized thing where we used to kind of have a sense of home, maybe whether it was where we grew up or where we live currently, but that we can't have that sense of home anymore. And we've lost cultural connection, and we've lost emotional connection to where we used to be able to say that these are the groups of people or individual people that we love and care about. And we're not supposed to do that anymore because that then excludes people. And with this language of inclusion, saying that we're supposed to include everyone everywhere, that actually creates isolation and a lack of a sense of community. And he made an interesting point that the idea of discrimination, which is basically illegal now in some ways, is that it used to be good. It used to be good to say that it was discriminatory, to that you had made a discriminating choice or a discriminating idea about what you were doing or the people that you're associated with. But that this imposed language leads to make us think that discrimination is automatically bad. Imposed language leads to this alienation because of this forced sense of, the definition of exclusion and inclusion being inverted and so on. All of these things that we're seeing in corporate policies and what the government is imposing on us in terms of hate crime incidents and so on. So he then commented on Keir Starmer's Island of Strangers speech, which he put out in May. So let's take a look at this clip and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
Good morning. I'm doing this because it is right, because it is fair, and because it is what I believe in. Let me put it this way. Nations depend on rules, fair rules. Sometimes they're written down, often they're not. But either way, they give shape to our values, guide us towards our rights, of course, but also our responsibilities, the obligations we owe to each other. Now, in a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that, these rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower paid workers rather than invest in our young people, or simply one that is sold by politicians to the British people on an entirely false premise, then you're not championing growth, you're not championing justice, or however else people defend the status quo. You're actually contributing to the forces that are slowly pulling our country apart.
So he received some pushback from this speech. And the reason for it is because some people felt that it referenced back to the former MP Enoch Powell's so-called Rivers of Blood speech, which he delivered to a conservative association in Birmingham on the 20th of April, 1968. And we'll put the full text of the speech in the show notes in case people are not familiar with it. But just to quote from one paragraph of the speech, that when he said, "It almost passes belief that at this moment," and this was 1968, 20 or 30 additional immigrant children are arriving from overseas in Wolverhampton alone every week. And that means 15 or 20 additional families a decade or two hence. Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad. We must be mad, literally mad as a nation, to be permitting the annual inflow of some 50,000 dependents, who are for the most part the material of the future growth of the immigrant descendant population. So Keir sort of went back on this, and he said in June, and this is a statement from an interview, he said, "I wouldn't have used those words if I had known they were or even would be interpreted as an echo of Powell. I had no idea, and my speechwriters didn't know either." So obviously these are not Keir's words, but he used them and didn't even really seem to know what he was saying, it would seem. Something else that I want to bring in from the conference, and I'm going to go back to this book later and hopefully do an interview with the author. This book is called The Memorizers, and it's by a lady from Northern Ireland called Rosemary Jenkinson. And she was a very interesting person to speak to. And she gave me a copy of her book to read. And just to read from the back cover, it says it's basically a dystopian satire fiction novel. And it says, "Your truth is the wrong kind of truth." And that's at the top of the back cover. And it says it is a blistering portrayal of World War III and a satire on the West's current assault on free speech. Jo, who's the main character, is a journalist reporting from the front line of a war-torn country. One day she wakes up in a hospital after being caught in a drone attack. The problem is she can't remember the story she was covering. And it has a satirical government warning on the front right before the book starts. And it says the book comes with a Class A mental health warning. It may propagate deleterious desires for individualism within the reader. We can't have that on in 2025 in the UK. It may lead to disaffection within society. And whosoever circulates this book with a view to undermining government authority will be subject to state sanctions. And so what are we seeing now? Well, we're actually seeing this taking place in real life. If we look at just over the weekend, we saw from Angela Rayner, our deputy prime minister, said that she is going to put the banter police in your office. And this is a headline from the Daily Mail from over the weekend. "Watch what you say by the water cooler. The workers' rights bill pressures firms to spy on so-called inappropriate conversations, and this is the employment rights bill, in which case employers must try to protect their staff from harassment by third parties. So we're seeing, once again, here's just, ultimately the control of language in your office, in your home, and so on. And just to leave this segment with something that was in my hotel room at this conference over the weekend, a quick photo of it. We see here even the manipulation of language even within your hotel room. Because, of course, if you've been in a hotel anytime in the past few years, you see that hotels no longer want to clean your room or change your towels or make your bed, because somehow that's going to be bad for the environment. So we were given 4 choices of the cards to hang up on our front doors of our hotel rooms. 3 of them were to donate to a charity if we chose to not have our room cleaned. The one that I chose was to spruce up my room. So we see that, again, the green language, the spruce, the tree, sprucing up your room. I put that one on my front door. And for whatever reason, Brian and Ben, they never came to clean my room. And I had to use dirty towels on my second day there. So I guess they were trying to force me to follow the agenda, even though I made a different choice. So I don't know what you think of that, but it was a very interesting weekend and a great conference.
Diane, well picked up, because of course, we're being manipulated everywhere we go now. If we stay in a hotel, never mind what they're going to say about changing towels, you're going to have the big TV screen on the wall pumping out BBC 24 hours a day. So this is going on everywhere. And language is the key to control of all of us. So we've got to be very, very aware of what the language is, how it's being used, and what the true meaning is. And a lot of people picking up on that clip about Keir Starmer saying what an untrustworthy Prime Minister he is. I think the word is dangerous. Ben, let's bring you in, because you've been warning over the last few months about the setting up of a new parallel system of government our institutions undermine, and probably most people have put the NHS as one of those institutions.
Right at the centre of the entire programme of change, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. So much excitement last week as the Blob, aka the Slaughterhouse, aka the National Health Service, issued its 10-year plan. Much awaited. It's called Fit for the Future. It was presented to us by these two, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister, remarkably for a year now. That's quite amazing. I wonder how much longer he'll last. And also Wes Streeting, Health Secretary. Importantly, crucially, let's keep on pointing this out. Both of them are members of the Fabian Society. Therefore, they are wolves in sheep's clothing. Wolves in sheep's clothing. They want you to know this. They want you to understand this. They are telegraphing to you exactly what they're about. And the change agenda inside the NHS is all part of this attack, essentially, on the British people. Predictably, the talk is all of change and crisis. I'll read a quick quote from the exec summary of the report that says the choice for the NHS is stark: reform or die. We can continue down our current path, making tweaks to an increasingly unsustainable model, or we can take a new course and reimagine the NHS through transformational change that will guarantee its sustainability for generations to come. This plan chooses the latter. It represents a break with the past, a complete break with the past inside the NHS in order to deliver this government's change agenda. It's driven by 3 fundamental shifts in how the NHS operates, from hospital to community, analogue to digital, sickness to prevention. I'll explain a bit more about what those mean later on in the segment. For now, let's just take a little listen to Wes Streeting and his team about how this plan was developed.
In 2025, the government published a 10-year health plan for England. The plan outlines the changes that need to be delivered to make the NHS fit for the future. To understand what the public and health and care staff want to see in the plan and inform its development, the Department of Health and Social Care invited staff and users of the NHS to discuss what they wanted from a future NHS. This conversation received over 250,000 contributions from members of the public and NHS staff.
We're kicking off the biggest conversation in the history of the National Health Service because we can see the scale of the crisis. We're already taking steps to get the NHS back on its feet, but we're also shaping a 10-year plan to make sure the NHS is fit for the future. And I genuinely think, while we could have come in as a government and imposed change, I genuinely think that change is better done with people than to people. And I also think that some of the best ideas we'll get about how the NHS can improve will come from the people on the front line who work in it, and crucially, the patients who use it.
Well, Ben, thank you for that video clip. As I watched it, I was almost back in the little church hall where Plymouth City Council took people for a facilitated big conversation over the changes to local government structure. And here we've got a facilitated big conversation over the NHS taking place.
Facilitated everything. Because they want to hear your opinion, Brian. It's not like they've got a plan already laid out that they just want you to agree to.
Okay.
So it's a national conversation. 250,000 people engaged, apparently. It's all about addressing a crisis. And this is propaganda, right? We have to understand it in those terms. We talked a bit about language, but let's also look at the visuals and the setting for this film that we've just looked at, right? So you mentioned a village hall. It looked like I've written down a bingo hall here. That's what it looked like to me. There was a church. And this is about making the NHS feel authentic to the British people when it is absolutely nothing of the sort, right? Let's hear a little bit more from that film about how the plan was developed.
Throughout the engagement, we've been supported by public dialogue specialists, Thinks Insight and Strategy, and their partners Kaleidoscope Health and Care and the Institute for Public Policy Research. There were lots of different ways for members of the public and health and care staff to shape the plan. From the Change NHS website, where everyone aged 16 and over could have their say, to workshops held by groups and organisations in communities across the country with people who are seldom heard in consultations of this scale. More than 17,000 people participated in this conversation. We also ran deliberative events online and in person across the country with 730 members of the public and 3,000 health and care staff, supporting people from different roles and walks in life to discuss and deliberate key elements of the plan. This also included an event with 27 children and young people aged 7 to 18. We consulted with NHS leaders and partner organisations to understand their perspectives. Finally, we hosted a national summit where almost 300 members of the public and staff from across England came together to share their thoughts on the future of the health service and discuss final proposals for the 10-year plan.
So, of course, the audience couldn't hear what I was saying while that video was playing. But essentially, I'm saying the more this lady says, the less the voice of the wider public. And the NHS is consulting 7-year-olds on change in the NHS. Right. That about sums it up. But I'd like to know what a deliberative event is. It sounds very fascinating. This is a complete scam. It's controlled dialogue in order for the government to get what it wanted in the first place.
Yeah, it's smoke and mirrors. Yeah. It's about manufacturing consent. This is an industrial process. If we can just put this up for manufacturing consent to whatever it is that is already on the agenda, and it's about producing quotes like this. You can see here. This is from the plan. There is a need, a real dire need, to make it better now, and it is very clear that if something radical doesn't change, then the NHS, as we know it, will not be able to continue to exist. Apparently, that came from a member of the public. Do you think they've been teed up for that, potentially? Yeah. So this is what this is about. It's about delivering quotes like this in a highly stage-managed and controlled environment in order to legitimise the transformation of the health service. And in reality, this is who's been developing the plan. Right, so actually this came from the Health Service Journal, and you can see here they've mapped out 7 distinct groups, 4 of them inside government, a bunch of people who are external influencers, Lord Darzai at Imperial College, Julian Hartley at CQC, Patricia Hewitt, who we've spoken about a lot recently, Mark Britnell, former KPMG. This is who's actually creating this policy. Yeah, and these are the agenda. This is the agenda that it's designed to serve, and all of this is pre-packaged. None of it's new. Most of this we've been reading about for at least the last 5 years. The idea that the public have influenced this in any way is it's deeply, deeply dishonest. So what are we going to get? First thing to know, I'll rattle through this in the interest of time, but it's good. We're spending £200 billion a year on it, on the health service. It doesn't work. And actually that equates to around £500 per taxpayer per month, which I think makes the NHS your second biggest expense behind your rent or your mortgage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? And it doesn't work. and they want to give it more money. And I know they're talking about changing it, but I don't trust these people to change anything, let alone a complex system like the one that we're talking about here. So what's going to happen? There'll be a new operating model. Amazingly, after 75 years, they've discovered that people are quite important. You can see in that sort of round thing at the bottom, we're going to organise the health system around people. Wow, this is incredible insight, the health service. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you did this. Hospitals, community. So we're going to explain a little bit about those three trends that I spoke about earlier. So as if we needed more NHS, we're going to have more NHS closer to us in our communities and importantly in our homes, apparently, and on our high streets. So big shift there. A lot of this driven by technology, huge focus on AI. They're absolutely dead set on this single patient record. This is an extraordinarily dangerous development. I know this is all presented about cost saving and efficiency, but it's not. It's about control. It's about surveillance. The shift from sickness to prevention. Difficult to disagree with a lot of the things that they're promoting here, but also difficult to give any credibility to this when they're saying that people should be smoking less and drinking less, but on the same time, the NHS is rolling out things like RNA vaccines and Ozempic and euthanasia and all of the other horrors that we've seen over the past few months, with no doubt more to come. Huge investments in technology, all of this coming from external companies in AI, data, genomics, genetic engineering. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, this biotechnological industry that they're building. And they are rolling this out quickly. They talked about this idea of the faster spread of innovation, getting the basics right, moving these things out into the system as quickly as possible, developing a pro-innovation regulation environment from the MHRA. Yeah, so that worked really well during COVID, didn't it? Yeah, let's get stuff. It's a market enabler. It's not a regulator. And finally, despite the fact that we're ploughing hundreds of billions a year of tax revenues into this, they're also still going to be going to leverage private sector investment, particularly around neighbourhood health. And under the Blair regime, the PPI that we paid about £300 billion for £50 billion worth of services. So, they clearly haven't learnt their lesson. They're doubling down. And my view, as far as the health system goes, is that we should frankly shut the whole thing down and start again.
There are many people who say that, and I think that's a dialogue we can have in the days to come. But let's get on to something which is very important, and that's a huge thank you to everybody who supports the UK column with a monthly membership or making donations or purchasing through the shop, because you are the ones that keep the UK column going. And it's been your immense support that's allowed us to reach next year, 2026, our 20th anniversary. So huge thank you to everybody who's making that financial input to keep UK column going. Now, we've got an advert here for Germ Warfare tonight at 7 p.m. And that's Andrew Treglier. And we know that germ segments are going down extremely well. So if you haven't seen one of those, do tune in. If you have seen one, join him anyway, and that will be very good. Now, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, an interview that I did with a retired journalist, Eugenie Verney, will be going out. She is an amazing lady, talking about a really incredible career in some of the more left-wing papers, some of the very big papers, what she saw and what she learnt from that career. And some of the conversation is comparing her experience during that time with what we now see happening in the press and the media. So watch out for that interview, which will be at 1 p.m. tomorrow. Now, Diane, I look to you for this one, 10th of July, Edinburgh. They're burning books again. What have you got?
Yes, I'm giving a talk for Common Knowledge Edinburgh this Thursday evening. So if you want to join me, please do so. And I'll be talking about a lot of the things I've been covering about libraries the past few months on UK Column, but a lot of other topics. When I say that they're burning books again, the problem is that they are literally removing books out of university libraries, which should be free. based on free speech and academic freedom, while at the same time accusing us of burning books in front of children that contains pornographic content and other types of things that we don't think that we should be seeing because it's not age appropriate. So I'm going to be exposing the hypocrisy and some of the ideology behind what's going on and talking about a book that I'm actually writing on this topic. So please join me on Thursday evening.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. We're also reminding people of our UK column on location in York. That will be Saturday, the 18th of October, 2025. We're still teasing over the release of tickets. That will be announced, and we're going to encourage as many people as possible to come to this event, because if we have another successful on location, we're going to look to try and undertake our weekend event for our 20th anniversary next year. So UK column on location in York is a very, very important event. Lovely city, absolutely beautiful hotel. More details on that closer to the time. Now, we've also got the Regional Sovereignty versus Devolution Dissident Meetup for the Southwest region. That will be Sunday, the 20th of July, 9:30 to 4:30. And that's the Field of Dreams, Exeter EX49JL. So have a look at our show notes for more details on that. We've also got the Thetford Truth and Freedom Beer Festival. Now, quite a small event in its overall capacity, but this is getting people to be together to swap ideas and information and have a good time, which has got to be a good thing. We've also got another Freedom Festival coming up, which is 1st to the 3rd of August. That's in Leicester. I think very competitive rates there. Some great speakers, including Andrew Bridgen and John O'Looney, plus music, and obviously great people on the ground, so you can mix and have fun and learn. And then the Freedom Music Fest, 22nd to the 25th of August, 2025, with lots of good music there. That's the bank holiday weekend, and UK column team will be there. So where do we go from here? Well, we're going to bring your mind back to our warnings about what the government is up to. And in 2025, there is only one thing on the minds of the UK government cabinet members, and that is war. Let's have a look at John Healey. We'll only watch a minute of this clip, but he does get quite fired up. It's almost like going back to the 1940s with a certain orator who was present overseas. Let's have a listen.
The world has changed. We must respond. The SDR is our plan for change for defence, a plan to meet the threats we face, a plan to step up on European security and lead in NATO, a plan that learns the lessons from Ukraine, a plan to seize the defence dividend from our record increase in defence investment to boost jobs and growth throughout the United Kingdom, and a plan to put the men and women of our armed forces at the heart of our defence plans. A country's armed forces are only as strong as the industry that stands behind them. We will make defence an engine for growth, to create jobs and increase prosperity in every nation and every region of the UK. We will place Britain at the leading edge of innovation in NATO. We will double investment into autonomous systems this Parliament. We will invest more than £1 billion to integrate our armed forces through a new digital targeting web, and we will finance a £400 million UK Defence Innovation Organisation.
Well, there we are. John Healey gets more and more excited. The music gets louder. The drive for war is greater and greater. But don't worry, because the minimum you're going to get out of it is a proper job. So really incredible to watch this propaganda coming out, not only Downing Street, but through the Ministry of Defence's propaganda machine known as Defence HQ. Truly appalling rhetoric by the Defence Minister, which is all about the beauties of war. Let's have a listen now to George Monbiot talking about Palestine action and how he really sees the agenda which the present government has been ramping up.
Making this video could get me 14 years in prison In fact, if you share this video, potentially you could get 14 years in prison as well. Because this video expresses support for Palestine action. You can blow the limbs off a child. Fine, no trouble at all. You can directly and deliberately target journalists, academics. You can blow up entire families. You can target people who are queuing for food aid. You can do what the hell you like, and you will not be condemned by this government. But spray a bit of paint on some warplanes, on some weapons of war, and that paint, that becomes a true weapon of war. That becomes a true aggression. That becomes, in Yvette Cooper's words, the disgraceful attack. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary of the United Kingdom, she has never used those words, a disgraceful attack, about any of the things that the Israeli government has done to the Palestinians. Every day, it murders, it maims, in total defiance of international law, and she has never once used the term disgraceful attack about any of that or any term like it. In fact, far from it, she's happy to be photographed with the Israeli ambassador. Great mates with the representative of a government who is right at this moment committing genocide.
So to me, that seemed a pretty straightforward opinion. On one hand, we've got a government spending and spending and spending for war and bloodshed. But if you dare criticise and take any action, then you're going to be labelled as a terrorist. And of course, free speech is going to be shut down. So quite a brave statement by that journalist. But what else are we seeing? Well, of course, we're now seeing the angst spill over onto the streets. And this is just a few clips from a Palestine demonstration taking place, of course, massive police support, and they then end up arresting some, I think, fairly elderly people who presumably the government now thinks is a threat to the nation state. I notice, of course, the amount of gear these police have got on compared to our police of old with their truncheon. We've now got the tasers and the handcuffs and the radios and the sprays. And of course, very, very aggressive policing. So do they really need to cart this elderly lady off in this manner? And then she's asked as she gets up into the van if she's happy to be searched. So if that's one level of protest going on, let's see how immigration is ramping up trouble on the streets by having a look at what's been happening in Ireland. Well, of course, the migrants present in Ireland didn't invade. They didn't fight their way ashore. They were invited in by Irish politicians as part of the EU's overall migration policy. And this is the truth of the matter. The trouble on the streets being created by our own government's policies. People need to remember this. Now, let's have a look at the wars, because, of course, the government here still absolutely supporting everything Ukraine does. We support it. We help fund the killing machine. But this is yet another of those nasty little clips about what's happening on the streets as the Ukrainians round up young men, bundle them into cars in order to take them off to die at the front. Watch the brutality here when this mother tries to intervene. So the report in this little posted video is that Zelensky's doing awful things and Ukrainians hate him. But of course, you're not going to hear that from the West or the UK. And if we have a look at the propaganda coming out from Defence HQ, we've talked about this sort of thing before, but here we've got basically the idea that the Russians have kidnapped all the Ukrainian children in their thousands and thousands, and they've never been given back. Whereas, of course, we've heard clear statements from the Russian side that they've asked for lists of these supposedly missing children. And of course, nothing ever comes back from the Ukrainian side. But Ben, appalling propaganda here. And I think it's pretty sickening. So that's just a little summary of the sorts of things that the UK government is getting up to. It is our own government that's attacking us. And if you can't understand what a policy is really doing or designed to do, try putting your mind over to the side that we are being attacked. And very often you will start to understand what's actually being done. Diane, that brings you back to manipulation and I think things in the direction of our children. What have you got to report?
Yeah, thanks, Bride. So this is a little bit more on the libraries. This was thanks to Kathy Mudge of Protect and Teach, who's been on UK Column with me previously, working really hard to expose the indoctrination of children throughout England. And she tagged me in this post that was on X that showed a BBC article. The headline on Friday, the 4th, when it was first posted on the BBC website, was "Trans Books Banned in Children's Library Sections." I do want to remind everyone that there are no banned books in the UK, but there are potentially collection decisions that can be made for age appropriateness in libraries, which is very different. The same article on the same link on Sunday, when I looked at it again, had a completely different headline. At this point, the headline was "Backlash as Reform Claims Trans Books Removed from Children's Library Section." Well, so The Guardian was also reporting on this story. And what that said in their headline was that a Reform councillor's boast about removing trans ideological books from children's library sections falls flat. Paul Webb, who's a Reform UK councillor who I'll come back to in a moment, said he ensured books and material were pulled from children's section of Kent libraries, but it emerges they were never there. Well, big surprise. All of this was actually misleading when we look at the headlines that were put on these mainstream sources. So I want to look at what actually was posted and what actually happened in the library based on what I was able to find out. Paul Webb, according to the BBC, is Reform UK's communities portfolio holder who oversees libraries. He said that the alleged removal of transgender-related books from the children's section of the libraries in Kent came after a, quote, concerned member of the public contacted him about what was seen in a particular library in Kent. So Paul Webb posted this video on his X account.
Good evening, everybody. Paul Webb here, your Reform UK Cabinet Member for Communities and Regulatory Services at Kent County Council. I was recently contacted by a concerned member of the public who found trans ideological material and books in the children's section of one of our libraries. I've looked into this and this was the case. I've today issued instruction for them all to be removed from the children's section of any of our libraries. They do not belong in the children's section of our libraries. Our children do not need to be told they were born in the wrong bodies. So from today, this will stop. Thank you very much.
So Lyndon Kemkaram, I hope I'm saying that name correctly, is Kent County Council's Reform UK leader who reposted that video and said that, this is great news. Paul Webb is doing wonderful work, etc. And I showed the photo here from the library where this was found, showing the book that was on the display. But then you see a little bit of pushback from this other account where it's basically sort of trying to expose, they think, Reform UK, whether or not this is actually the case or if it's just another form of activism, I'm not sure. But this account said that Councillor Paul Webb has openly lied as a councillor, a breach of the code of conduct, according to this account. The books they said were removed from children's sections were not in a children's section, and so you can see the photos here. And then they went on to say where this library was. It was a library in Kent County Council, but that the shelving was not in the children's section. It was in a display area. So this particular book that was being discussed is called The Autistic Trans Guide to Life, which is classified in the adult nonfiction section of the library, according to the library catalog. The issue here, however, is that I would say that everyone is being a bit misleading about this because the book was on display at the entrance to this particular library in Kent County Council during Pride Month, of course, during June when a lot of this gets put out on display. But that, of course, means that anyone of any age who walked in the library would see it at the entrance because It wasn't in the children's section, even though it was officially classified and shelved in the adult nonfiction section. Any child who walked in could potentially walk in and want to look at the book. And I don't have access to the entire book itself, but I did find some preview pages of it from looking online. And it is very confusing for anyone, including any child who would happen to pick this up. And it's got definitions in it such as neutroi, Neutroi, describes a person who identifies as neutral or having no gender, being neither male or female. This can be associated with gender dysphoria or not. Gender fluid is an identity under the non-binary and trans umbrella. That means a gender is fluid and can change. There's another one, pangender, means identifying as more than one gender. Pangender people may be all genders, not quite sure how that works biologically, or both the binary genders of male and female. Pangender people often use they, them pronouns. So that is what's, even if it is classified in the adult section, that was at the entrance to the library. And so I decided to take a look a little bit more into the Kent County Council Library catalog to see what is actually being classified under trans, because I know for a fact that libraries all over the country are doing this. And so I just pulled up two examples here from the catalog in Kent County Council. One is a book called Beyond Magenta, Transgender Teens Speak Out, where this woman, Susan, she interviewed trans young people, basically transgender or gender neutral young adults, and talked about how to represent them. And what we see here under the subject section of the library catalog record, the subject heading, which is the official sort of classification based on keywords and terms that are assigned from an official vocabulary that libraries use all over, is transgender youth, United States, juvenile literature, transgender children, juvenile literature. So juvenile literature means, in this case, as well as teenage nonfiction, that it would in fact be placed in the children's section of the library. And another one for very young children, When Leonard Lost His Spots, a transparent trail. That's not the word transparent, that's transparent, two separate words. What happens when a beautiful lioness discovers she was born in the body of a male leopard? The family is shocked, the transition begins, and an amazing story unfolds. Narrated by a young cub, When Leonard Lost His Spots is a sensitively crafted story that exemplifies how open communication can pave the way to acceptance in an ever-changing world. Join Leonard, Leona, and Cub on this unique journey. And again, here we see the subjects are listed as transgender parents under juvenile literature, transsexuals, juvenile literature, children of transgender parents, juvenile literature, and children of transsexual parents, juvenile literature. And so again, these are just two examples, and I'm sure there are many, many more in Kent County Council and in libraries across the country where there are these sort of trans books, or whatever you want to call them, being placed in front of children. So I think that both the BBC and The Guardian were being very disingenuous in saying, oh, this isn't actually a children's book, there's no such thing, and this is all a lie, and Reform is lying, and so on. But I'm going to continue to investigate this, and I have at least one meeting set up with one Reform UK councillor to talk about what's going on, and hopefully I'll have some following reporting on this next week, Brian.
Diane, thank you very much. And your report having an effect on our audience, as we can see from the chat box, people picking up how really, really dangerous this is, and of course how vulnerable the children are. So please keep up your research, and we will continue to keep warning about what's happening. Anybody who's tackling this, doesn't matter what party you're associated with, if you start to do the right thing, then you deserve support. So well done, anybody who is out there trying to stop this pernicious agenda attacking the minds of children. Now, let's just hop across onto the subject of climate change and CO2, but I just have to bring in a reference again to Sophie Istou, who's the freelance journalist who was involved in that massive BBC piece on transgender in the US military, because what I discovered is that she'd also done this sounds audio interview, which is about the production of CO2 and the worsening of climate change as a result of war. So nothing from the BBC over the millions of dead and wounded in Ukraine. They're just worried about how much CO2 has been produced from the explosions. Quite sickening, Ben, but take us away with a deeper look into matters climate change.
Absolutely. It's unsurprising, but certainly sickening. So we're going to have a little look at the climate gravy train, and we're going to focus on London and the last weeks of June, actually, because London Climate Action Week touched down. And as you can see here, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals arrayed there in the centre, telling us what this is really all about, right? So this is the UN, the World Economic Forum, the global public-private partnership, the partnership between money and power, what is driving the climate agenda. And this was overseen by this gentleman, Mete Choban, MBE, Deputy Mayor of London for Environment and Energy, who was saying, "I'm incredibly proud to have overseen the biggest ever London Climate Action Week with over 700 events over the week and 45,000 people engaged." Right, that is absolutely astonishing. And regular viewers will be familiar with Choban because we first came across him just over 2 years ago now, as he was the co-host of this event with Tony Blair and his institute, talking about the future of Britain, where Tony Blair and Choban as co-hosts. I mean, it's a remarkable accolade for a young man in his early 30s to be put up there alongside Tony Blair, basically laid out their vision for the future of the country. And Keir Starmer, then leader of the opposition, basically turned up at the end of the day and said, "Yes, I agree with what Tony said." So that tells you a lot about where the agenda's coming from. And then we uncovered My Life, My Say, the youth charity, which is being used to radicalise the nation's young people, to align them with the global technocratic agenda, to manufacture consent to all of these changes that are happening across our society and our economic and our political systems, that was essentially teed up by the US State Department, MI6, NCS. You got David Cameron sitting there in the background of the National Citizens Service, UK Youth, which is overseen by Princess Anne, two branches of the Rothschild family, Tortoise Media, Mete Choban, sitting there in the middle of all of this, now overseeing the Showpiece London event for climate change. If that doesn't explain to you what's really going on here, then I don't know what will, to be honest with you.
We'll keep pushing it.
Yeah, I mean, we got to look what's going on, everybody. And where best for us to go to get some insight into the shiny, happy people of the climate agenda than to Gold's House at Freud's Communications. Let's have a little look at what happened on the day.
Top of mind for me at London Climate Action Week is speed and scale. We've got 750 events with thousands and thousands of people here, all with their sleeves rolled up, ready to work, looking for solutions. So much innovation. I'm hopeful because we've got all the component pieces, we've just got to put them together differently.
Real climate leadership for me looks like ensuring we deliver what we actually committed to do. So we go from promises to practices, and all of us playing our role in this, we can get there.
We need to hurry up. A sense of urgency, I think, is really, really important. We have the solutions to a really great way of life. Actually, a lot of the things that tackle climate change are the things that give us better lives.
I think there is a desire among people that I know for new ideas and new solutions and new imaginings of what could be.
Welcome to Freud, and it's great to be here. And it's so important that we're meeting this week, finding the solutions to the biggest challenge facing our planet.
So lots of food and music and good times in order for them to help people who are not experiencing the food and the music and the good times.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. New imaginings of what could be. I mean, and this is all narrative, right? Really crucially, we talked about the BBC a moment ago. This is what they called their event. This is about rewriting the climate story. This is all story. It's not based on anything. It's just made up. And we don't have time to go through all the people that we saw in the video, but this lady jumped out at me. This is Tangam Debonair, who is a baroness, sits in the House of Lords, and she was very keen for us to just hurry up because the good life lives at the end of all of these climate innovations, apparently. And this roots us right into the seat of power in the UK. She actually is the chair, I believe, of the Labour Women's Network. And you can see here, sisters, what a team. This is the brilliant executive committee. You can actually see she's wearing the same dress, so maybe this was actually on the same day.
Saving CO2.
Well, it could be that too, who knows? And actually, the ladies bit is really important, right? Because this is being driven primarily by women, right? It really is. And we can see a few more examples here. So this is from the Imagine Leaders Network, who I spoke about last year. I can provide some links. You can see we've been talking about this for over 12 months now. We can see there's Pat Mitchell, who is on the right-hand side in the yellow, who is the founder of the Connected Women Leaders Network that we spoke about earlier on this year, and one of the co-founders of Project Dandelion. So you can see the dandelion there on a little natty yellow jacket. Imagine is run by this lady. This is Valerie Keller, who is also a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. And they love wearing these jaunty little hats and feathers, the Imagine crew. This is the sort of their little thing that they do, you know, so sort of climate meets high fashion.
Yes.
You know, and this is the kind of absurd world that these people live in. And Imagine is overseen by Paul Polman, you can see him bottom left, who is, amongst many other things, a trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation. Right, so these are the self-proclaimed global elite, the well-heeled, gilded special ones who float around in the stratosphere making decisions that are going to transform the lives of everyone else on Earth while getting paid enormous amounts of money to do it. Right, crazy. Also, we had, importantly, ISWE, and there we saw Rachel Kite, who's the UN Special Representative on Climate Change. She was also in that Goals House video. Mary Robinson, who's chair of the elders, also founder of the Dandelions, wearing her dandelion. She was at the ISWE thing. This was all paid for by the Wellcome Collection, by the way. So a lot of the money flowing into this is from charitable foundations, philanthropic wealth. Sandrine Dixon de Clèves from the Club of Rome was there. Again, really reinforcing the point. Let's have a look at that badge that she's got on. Boom. Women are leading the new climate revolution.
Wow.
Right? They're telling you women are leading the new climate revolution. And this is why increasingly we're not allowed to criticize women. If you criticize these people, then you're a misogynist. It's hateful. And that's how they're shutting down debate around these unbelievably important issues as it relates to the future of the whole of humanity, right? And Dandelions in particular talk about the fact that they want to make every issue a climate issue and they want to turn every woman on Earth into a climate activist. Yeah, they're not messing around here. Importantly, ISWE, as I said, are involved. Why is that important? A couple of reasons. First one is that they run these participatory processes. So again, as we talked about in the NHS segment, this is about manufacturing consent to preconceived outcomes. They're running this global assembly for COP and ultimately as an extension of that, the UN, but they're also active on the ground in the UK, most notably through a partnership with this organisation called Community Organisers, which I'll provide some links. You can go and have a look at a recent session that they held together, talking about local democracy in the UK. And the community organisers were first written about on the UK column back in 2013, and it was started as a 4-year national training programme in 2011, designed and run by locality who are directly linked to Common Purpose and funded by the Cabinet Office, who are all trained by Common Purpose under David Cameron, which takes us back into the early days of the column. You know, so this is running on the rails of a political transformation that has been put in place 10, 15, nearly 20 years ago.
And Regenerate, I saw, was part of that as well.
Yes, they were. Yes,
major organisation. Right, we must end our news now. We never have enough time to get into all of the detail of these things, but we are desperately trying to get people to focus on the drivers of what's happening, the dangers of change in UK, and we've covered a lot of ground today. Let's just end on a bit of black humour. Diane, over to you.
Everyone should be really, really afraid because there's a new Frankenstein variant of COVID that's circulating around the country. It's also known as XVG or Stratus or NB181, depending on who you ask. But apparently, according to a dermatologist who owns a skin clinic, it's a descendant of the JN1 Omicron subvariant and carries several mutations in its spike protein, enhancing its ability to bind to human receptors and potentially evade immunity from previous infections or vaccinations. And it says it's highly contagious. However, it also says, according to one article, many people may not realize that they even have COVID. But for those displaying symptoms, you might actually get a sore throat. So be careful, Brian and Ben. You might get a sore throat. You might get a Frankenstein virus. And
Be
then
afraid.
I don't know what happens.
Be afraid. Be very afraid. Or maybe not. We must end there. Ben, thank you very much for joining me. Diane, thank you. For all our members of UK Column, we'll be back for UK Column Extra in just a few minutes. For the rest of the viewers, wherever you are in the world, thank you so much for joining us. Join us again for the news on Wednesday. We'll be back then at 1 o'clock. See you then. Bye-bye.